Welcome to the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California. I'm Michelle Meow, a member of the Board of Governors and a producer here of the Michelle Meow Show, your A through Z, covering the LGBT, LMNOP, and everyone in between. Thank you so much for all of you who are joining us tonight on this beautiful Friday night. A little windy here in San Francisco, but that's okay. It's normal. And thank you for all of you who are joining us online. Let's give a big round of applause to Michelle Sugihara.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I love being in San Francisco. This is always so great to see some new faces. I love that. As Michelle said, I'm Michelle Sugihara. I'm the executive director at CAPE, the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment. We are the world's longest running nonprofit supporting Asian Pacific Islander culture, people, and stories. I want to especially thank Michelle Meow, the Commonwealth Club, Alaska Airlines, and Priscilla Lim for making today possible. The two films that we're about to watch are part of last year's winners of the Julia Escow Short Film Challenge, which grants 4 filmmakers $25,000 each to make a short film. And the challenge is in partnership with Janet Yang Productions and is sponsored by Julia Escow and the Asian Women Leadership in Philanthropy Fund. So the first film we're going to watch is called Zari. The logline is, amidst preparations for her sister's wedding in India, young American Nilu forges an unexpected connection with Zabe, a quiet sari store clerk with a secret. What's really interesting and fun about this particular film is that it was an international shoot, and she shot in Delhi with a mostly local Indian cast and crew. So without further ado, please enjoy Zari.
और अब हमारे मोटू की बारी कुछ अच्छा दिखाइए. That'll make our little boy look like a lady.
बिल्कुल मैम. ज़ेब, ये देखिए.
Oh.
If he wears it, you will have to buy it. Jeb is our top model.
यूजुअली जरी का काम बॉर्डर पर होता है. एज बट इट मेक्स साड़ी शाइन.
All right. Hope you all enjoyed that. The filmmaker Shruti Parak will be joining us for the talkback after the next screening. The next short film is called Flight 182, and Flight 182 follows a Punjabi father who must choose between caring for his ailing mother in India or protecting his family in Canada amidst separatist warnings. Some very special news about this particular topic is that this year marks the 40th anniversary of the true story, and it marked the biggest attack before 9/11. And it could provide separately. This feature version is being worked on for this film. So this is a proof of concept of sorts. And the filmmaker is also here and will be joining in person to talk back afterwards. So please enjoy Flight 182, and we'll be back shortly.
For the safeguard and protection of the religion, we must all be united.
Hello.
Okay, everybody listen up. X-ray machines are down. We're going to be using these. So everybody take one. I'll show you how it works.
When you're only at 2, good morning. Squawk 2005 and go ahead.
Let's give another huge round of applause for our filmmakers, Flight 182 and Zari. And now I'd like to welcome back Michelle Sugihara of CAPE, and also Ripon. Our filmmakers are here with us. one here in person, and then Shruti's here with us via Zoom. And this will be our special fireside chat part of the program. Thanks again, everyone, for being with us. And those are two wonderful films. I think we'll kick off by having Michelle start by talking about, these two short films who are recipients, right, of the grant, as well as we can say winners, and you went through a selection process. So why don't you talk a little bit about, the background, the context of the grant, and just kind of maybe even, some reasons why these two films were selected.
Absolutely. So very proud of this whole program in general. It was really the brainchild of Janet Yang, who's the president of the Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Sciences. And she got together with Julia Gao, who is a huge supporter of our community. And they birthed this idea of how do we help women and non-binary filmmakers with their projects. And then they came to CAPE and they said, hey, we've got this idea, we'd love to work with you. And that was now 4 years ago. We're heading into our fourth iteration of it. And we just had a community screening last weekend of our year 3 films. And this is from year 2. So definitely building up quite a library of phenomenal short films. The first year, the 4 winners were granted $15,000, and then thereafter, it got bumped up to $25,000, and some of them have raised additional funds in addition to that. Some of them also have taken advantage of a lot of our in-kind donors, which also just helps to defray some of the costs. It's very costly to make any film, short, feature, or otherwise, and through the partnerships, through the hard work of our head of programs, Rianne Moore, we're able to get, for example, some discounted music, which is also could be very expensive, some camera equipment, and just some other in-kind donors that have been very generous in supporting the program. So here we are.
Here we are. Well, let's dive in, to the films itself and the filmmakers and process. I mean, we always have these questions, right? As viewers, just kind of how you get there, how you build the ship, how you, even the inspiration behind it, and both films told in different formats or different ways, right? But still felt very personal, and especially for us who are API women and non-binary, in which it's like, how do we tell our stories, in whether it's reality or not, like part of it, but like how do we tell our story? And so I'll start, with Ripon. Obviously, we saw in the credits. I mean, a lot of this or parts of it, you can see. You've used footage, real footage, and then, a story that you were telling. But let's start with the inspiration, right? Like just wanting to put the film together.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me here and for CAPE. For me, like my love of cinema really comes from not belonging in the world and being told from a young age that there wasn't enough space to take up as a South Asian or AAPI woman. And so it was interesting to me that in my South Asian community, when we talk about the Air India bombings of 1985, it's something that is spot on and people know what it is immediately. And yet, when we look at it in the global context, a lot of people just don't know. And it has to do with media and it has to do with representation, whether we look at what was in the past. And it wasn't until really COVID happened and I kind of saw the themes of the fragility of life. And this, you may remember that feeling we all had as humans, just being like, oh my God, what if we were to lose someone we love in an instant? And it was then that I really found the courage to tell this story in a short film. And it was a true blessing to have CAPE and Julia Gao's grant, because I knew at that point in my trajectory, I had really self-financed a lot of different short films. But I wanted to make a period piece and make it authentic. And that was really the catalyst of like opening my pathway and really giving me the yes and the support from the community to activate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And Shruti, same question to you, inspiration and the pathway, to get to putting this film together and telling a story that I mean, for many of us who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community, and API, this is an intersection in which you do make a big decision whether you're going to go forward with telling the story or not. But tell us about the inspiration behind making Zari.
Thanks again, everyone, for coming and for having me. So Zari was inspired, honestly, by my trips back to India as a kid with my family. I was born here in the U.S. and grew up here, and we would go back home to visit family regularly, and I'd be dragged on shopping trips to sari stores, and I'd be fascinated by how they function, which is mostly run, they're run by men, and saris are garments usually worn by women. But in sari stores, there's sort of this fluidity of gender expression, and in that the men are kind of showing you and modeling the saris. It's very normal there to kind of see the men drape the sari onto themselves. And as a kid, I thought that was really fascinating. As a kid, I also was very, I hated wearing flouncy Indian clothing, which is very feminine. When you're a girl and you dress up in Indian clothing, it's very feminine, it's very pretty. I didn't like it. And so, I think I was kind of inspired in a way also by Indian society being kind of different in terms of gender fluidity than the US, and sometimes more fluid and more is kind of acceptable than here in some ways. And at the same time, it's very patriarchal. So there were a lot of things I was kind of trying to just, explore in this story. But at the end of the day, it's a coming of age story about two, misfits who express themselves differently, who find each other, and in doing so are able to sort of see a reflection and maybe feel a little more seen. And I just think that's an important story to tell, and it's something I think a lot of people would like to see and need. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who's not a misfit? Raise your hand. Yeah, by the way, audience, if you have got a burning desire to ask a question, we do have a mic floating around, and so just kind of raise your hand when we ask for those questions, and we'll get a mic to you for any of our talent here on stage. So this is an interesting question because it goes to all three of you, and it's an open, conversation, because I feel like, going back to what Michelle said, putting a film together is so much work and very hard work. It's laborious. And getting the support you need to kind of put it all together is also very difficult and challenging. So I wonder, who's the first person you call when you say, I'm going to take on this big thing, and that person is going to help me put it all together. I'm going to go back to Michelle first to, just tell us, like, who do you think filmmakers call, like their first phone call that's like, hi, help me?
Oh, I feel like it would be the producer, right? Help me I don't know, but we'll see what they have to say. But also, I think it's who's going to help me fund this.
I'll take this. I mean, for me, producer is such an open term, and I'll be quite frank with you. There's quite a few people in this audience that are the spine of my creativity. They're my family, my friends, my community, people at the temple, people like in my neighborhood. And those are generally like my group threads. I just blast it out. Hey, you guys, I'm making a movie. This is what I'm going to need, and let's get it together. And obviously, I have traditional producers, but this film, and Shruti can speak to it too, we had $25,000. But when you're thinking about like how do you pay people, how do you put this puzzle together, and I shot mine in 2.5 days. I believe Harpreet is here. She's the one who really helped me take her trailer home and completely flip it over into what was the functioning home set. And I like to kind of do it this way because I grew up from the grassroots and advocacy, and I feel like film used to be very mysterious and far away because I didn't know what it was. And I think like I just really changed my mindset as I was growing into this field, and I would look to my left and my right and my friends and my family, and that ability to like really formulate community is to me the most integral part of the things that I make. And so you'll see a lot of that in the work. And to me, that's just how I make it happen with family and obviously incredible creatives. But that's kind of my first start of entry.
Shruti?
For me, for Zari, it was my producer actually. Before getting the grant, before winning, the being one of the winners of the Julia Escow Short Film Challenge, we had a process that we were going through, kind of rounds of interviews and stuff. And I was thinking, like, okay, wait, if I get this, I need to be prepared. Wait a second. So I started thinking, asking around, and I reached out to the producer of Zari, who at the time I kind of only knew as an acquaintance. Her name is Kadri Akhtar, and she's from Delhi, but lives in LA, and I knew she was producing. So I basically put out are you interested in this in case this thing happens? And then when I got the grant, that was the first call. I was like, I think we're doing this. You still down? So yeah, it's sort of the first for me. That was the first because in addition to, just being able to have somebody else who is going to jump in logistically to get started on things. We produced this together. She's from India and I'm not. I am from the US. I grew up here. I've never shot anything there. I've only gone there to visit family. So I really needed someone who had some experience with that. And then she had connections there who further helped us because for her even, it had been a while. So we needed people on the ground as well. So that started a whole process of getting connected to every single person we knew on the ground in India to get us, the right people to make this film. And then it was a big community effort for sure.
It's so interesting to hear everybody's process because, it's just so unique and it's so different. We'll open up to the audience now for any questions that you have. We've got about 12 minutes left on the clock. And so just want to take a temperature reading. Any questions here for our talent on stage?
I have two questions, one for both of one for each of the artists. Also, just hi, my name is Ria. First one for Ripon. This also relates to your previous short film that I saw before, Broken Drawer. I don't know if it was plural. Singular.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
hi, Ria.
But I think the biggest question I had for that and this one is there's scenes in which people aren't speaking English, but you choose not to include English subtitles. And not to nerd out on film, but with continuity editing, right? Viewers are positioned in this very privileged space where you try to they have this omnipresence understanding, and not including subtitles tends to break that. I wanted to know what drove that decision?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I do, as a filmmaker, I know this was a bit saturated on this screen. I do want to point that out because there was a very particular, everything about this film was specifically chosen, including the filmic look, the Panavision versus the VHS. But I'm so glad that you brought up the idea of language. If we think about it too, I chose to make this a narrative instead of a documentary. And the stylistic choice of the visual language was to really bring you as if you're inside of this film, you're inside of this home. And I don't like to over-explain things where I don't feel that they are added creative value, right? And I think that oftentimes as a person of color and a South Asian woman, we see things that we are expected to just know and not be curious about oftentimes, right? And I think that there's an opportunity when you're using the mother language to be able to show that in the space in an organic fashion. And so because it was the murmurings of the past, I really wanted to bring the audience in. Even the Dolly movement is the first shot of this film. It's really to invite you into this past, but grounded into this present moment. And thereafter, really make you feel like you care about this film because in all honesty, it can be any of us in a moment of tragedy. And that's why this film is about all of us, And so to me, it was important to really care about this film and the details of the language And I'm just really grateful to say that I speak Punjabi fluently, and to be able to have people of all walks of life in this set, and to be able to have a shorthand in Punjabi with my phenomenal actors, both Sandeep Morrison and Gurinder, who's my brother, but who did earn the part, and Nisa. It was just, you don't get too many opportunities like this.
Yeah, that's super cool. Thank you so much. All right, for Shruti, just to preface this one a little bit, I'm a senior at UC Berkeley, and I'm taking like a visual South Asian, like visual art and like spectatorship course. And today in class, we were talking about the concept of like the diaspora in our visual arts. And I feel like your film relates to that theme a lot. And I wanted to know if that was something you were considering while making your film.
That's super interesting. What a cool class. I would love to take that. Yeah, this film is it's about the diaspora, and it's about a diasporic experience and the connection to, India, the connection to the homeland, the motherland, and people there. I think a lot, this film is not just about exploring gender and, fluidity and how we express ourselves. It's also about the cross-cultural experience and the diasporic experience and what that feels like. It's an additional way of feeling kind of untethered and alone sometimes. So that's part of what Neelu's also going through in her experience in India, in Delhi. Yeah, I think it's a big part of like what I wanted to get into this film, because that's, it's something I know personally. And I think a lot of people who grew up in the diaspora can relate to. So, and I think there's a lot of diasporic work at this point. So I wanted it to be part of the story. I didn't want it to be the entire point of the story. I wanted it to be, the experience that Neelu already is in, right? And she's in the process of exploring another experience, which is how does she express herself and her gender, and how does her cultural background and her diasporic background also affect that? It's how her mom talks to her. It's how her sister talks to her. It's how her, her family, what her family expects from her. So, and then to experience something very liberating back in the motherland is something that I think is different, because sometimes we expect, I think especially growing up, I expected sometimes things to be a little backwards in India, which was just not correct and not right. And I think that's what Neelu finds out.
We have time for one or two more questions from the audience, if you have them for our talent here. I have a lot of questions, obviously. I can keep you all here all night long, especially, when we get into the nitty-gritty of both films. There's always a big question about budget and how to put one together, especially when you're doing a short. I don't know if it's easier or if it's harder, but I'd love to hear from all of you. We'll start with Michelle again. What do you think? Do you hear from filmmakers who tell you, like, okay, and I don't know if it's part of the grant process, right, where you ask for an initial budget or not. But yeah, that's such a hard question to answer, especially, in my opinion, at least, as an Asian queer person. I hate talking about money. Go ahead.
It's a tough question because every film is different. Depends on your setting and your cast, and Shruti shot internationally, and so I think there's a lot of different pieces that go into it. I feel like more money is always better. A lot of times, $25,000 is a lot of money, but also there's a lot of other components that go into making a short film. And so, as I mentioned, I know some of the filmmakers raised more money on top of that. I've heard of shorts being over six figures and for a short film, but then I've also heard of features being sub 100K. So I think it really depends on the resources as well as all the other factors.
Yeah, Shruti, do you want to take it? Because I can talk about budget all day long. It's my favorite part.
It is? Oh gosh, this is good then.
I like to give a lot of my secrets.
Okay, I'll just say, budget is a really tough nut to crack. It's, you, especially with short films and especially with independent films, where shorts are often and usually independent, in terms of like they're not financed by a large studio or production company with a lot of money. We're always looking for money, and there's always like a scramble to like be able to fit things within a budget. And I think the most important thing for me is like considering also like, how are you paying people? Are you treating people fairly? I think with an independent film, it's a tough thing because we are struggling so hard to make our art, and it costs a lot of money. Film costs like the most money of all the arts. And at the end of the day, something my producer and I really wanted to focus on was to make sure everyone got paid. I mean, sometimes on indie film, not everyone gets paid, right? Sometimes people do things on their, because they do it for free of their own volition, but we kind of didn't want that. People did get paid less than they normally would, but that was one thing we really focused on. And ultimately, the budget, I did have to fundraise some beyond the grant, but I think it's worth it to make sure you have the right people and people, get paid. But, there's always also contingency stuff balloons. Sometimes you find that something is ending up costing more at the last second. So you always have to have that cushion. And as you make more, you just learn. You learn how this works because you make mistakes as you go.
Yep.
Yeah. I just want to add, because I know there are quite a few filmmakers here. I think the most important thing that enough people don't talk about is like, what is your end goal with a short film, right? Because sometimes it plays the part of a calling card, or it's the step to get management, or it's the step to get you the directing sample. And I was at a point where I knew that I wanted to make this film as a true concept for a feature film, so that I could take this and say, look, this is what I'm able to do with $25,000. Now, if you were to give me the full budget, let me tell you what the vision of that would be. And that's exactly like the juncture in which I'm at. And I wanted to hold myself accountable to the $25,000. And I say that with rigor, not to say like we paid equitably, but you have to think outside the box and be so innovative. So this film really taught me what I'm able to do and what I bring to the table as a filmmaker, because I had to really rewrite the story in a way that I knew could serve that kind of budget. If I was to go and make the dream project of the short film and do all of the evidence pieces and do the do the big body of the film, I knew I couldn't deliver. It would compromise everything. So you have to, as a filmmaker, put yourself in a position where your script is your North Star. If that script is tight, and I love that Kate said it has to be 10 pages at the time. So that meant every single word mattered, what you were saying and what you were doing. And I share that because it completely rewired how I submitted the script. I submitted it as a family contained in one location, right? And then I had to really think outside the box. And I was fortunate. I put out calls to my family, really innovative. And I split this shoot because I took it back home to a farm town where there wasn't the access to have an airport. I ended up shooting half a day in Los Angeles, but then ended up going 2 days back to the trailer home in a farm town, because I knew that this type of film needed enough resources and enough support to really flip a trailer home and make it look 80s with wallpaper and all the details. And I won't really get into the nitty gritty of that, but as a filmmaker and an indie filmmaker, I always believe, you have to build a team. And you have to really offset what are your strengths, where are you able to pay, how are you able to navigate and steer. And for me, that meant I had to wallpaper with the support of my neighbors. I had to call on people I love that are in this crowd and say, look, it's midnight, but we got to put the flooring in because I know my production budget to pay equitably is X amount, but Y amount needs to come from labor that we as a community. And then I called on thrift stores. I became allies. I know, I'm just telling you the details.
You're amazing.
People are like, I called on Panavision and I was like, and Panavision was like, yes, here's the grant. And I said, I want to have a Alexa 35 for the filmic look. And I want to be able to, and I use this, the same lenses as the Bear, like H series lenses. Like, that's a gift to use as a filmmaker. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I think a lot of people are like, oh, you need X budget to make a film, or you need Y thing. But I think you got to have grit. You got to be grounded in a way where your art is a labor of the people who give to you. And then I think you really lean on the people that are better than you in ways to guide you. And that's just honestly been incredible. And like, I'm grateful to say, because of this short film and then taking it back into a community festival first and foremost, instead of like some crazy A-list one, I was able to attach a phenomenal actress named Archie Punjabi to the feature, So I just really share that from a place of love and commitment to the art, because I think not enough people talk about these sorts of things that are essential to making a film.
Yeah, you're so 100% spot on. Thank you so much for being genuine and honest and upfront about that. Because, you'll find as we go out there in the reception, by the way, that lots of people are going to have questions about all of this. One last question for you, and it really is just pulling this out on a bigger lens. You like that?
Got it.
Yeah. But that... Gosh,
are you adding some grain to it too? Please?
What's that?
Are you going to add some grain to this lens? Okay.
By the way, we apologized for the saturation issue, and we were trying to figure it out. And Dan and I back there, I was like, I don't want to screw this one up. So let's just go with it. But no, in all seriousness, the arts are under threat, I guess is a word for it, right? Especially if you're API, especially if you're brown, and especially if you're, stacks up against us women, go down the list. And so organizations like CAPE are incredibly important to us right now, because when we don't have the avenues that we thought we did, this is a place that we need to start. We're so grateful to people like Julia Gao and Janet Yang and Michelle Sugihara and the rest of the team at CAPE. How do we sustain this, during this time? And the takeaway for many of the folks, that your film impacts and why you're telling these stories, being the, person that you are. And we're going to start with Michelle, sustainability.
That's a big topic. It's been a interesting time, certainly. And this is, I think, when we lean into community even more so. And why it's important for us to continue to also be here to support that community. In fact, this whole challenge started from the notion of Hollywood being this insular boys' club, essentially. And it's how do we open the door to lengthen the pathway for women and non-binary filmmakers to get their projects noticed? Because what we saw was a lot of them were winning like Sundance or what have you with their big splash to debut features. But if you don't even have the short that you can use as that proof of concept, if you don't even have the money to even make it, you're not even in the game. And so that's really how this all started, and that's the ethos really of CAPE generally in the larger scale, is how do we support each other, how do we lift as we climb? And in this time where nonprofits, quite frankly, with a name like Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, has a bit of our target on our backs, and so that's really where we're hoping to lean into the community as well.
Yeah, I mean, sustainability is a big topic, and I think that this industry is extremely difficult. I think there's like the 1%ers that you see that lie on the margins of success, but it's like this path where, and I'll be the first to tell you, I think being from my cultural background and not having accessibility in some ways, I've always had a supporting career. and I would take that money and I would channel it into my content. I think the one thing that people can't deny is who you are and what you bring to the table. That is going to be a constant. And I'm in a point where people will say like, oh, they're going to look for their mandates of you don't have this thing or this is too big or this. And I feel like that's where the power of who you are and being able to make your own content, to me, that's sustainability. That's your own agency to be like, hey, no matter what is happening in the industry, here is product, here you go, And I think to Michelle's point is leaning to the left and right and building laterally. That is true grassroots. And that's why I think it's just like a full life circle moment it's no different than the really the pools that you grow up with when you're trying to make a voice or trying to rally for something. We all come together collectively to have a human voice. And I don't know, I think that's my two cents
I love
on it.
that. Yeah, agency is sustainability. You got that for sure. Shruti, you have the honor of leaving us with a mic drop moment.
All right. Well, I think it's about organizing among each other, among ourselves. And again, community is everything, but it's also about strategic and intentional organizing around what do we need and what do we want, right? So I think there's so many incredibly talented filmmakers out there, so many incredibly smart and driven, nonprofits and organizations that are there to help those filmmakers. And then there are people who are out there who want to fund financially those nonprofits and those filmmakers. This is how we create our own little bubble, our circle, right? And it's already there. We already have it to some extent, but I think to really bolster it and lean on each other and work together to make sure that's strong. That's a strong circle, so that we don't have to depend too much on the big studios or like funding coming from other places that might go away in the near future. Just really strengthening those bonds and being very intentional about what we believe is important to say and uplift, because certain things are already not okay to say, and it's hard to wrap one's mind around. But we have to stand very strong in how we want to say it and be able to express ourselves. And I think film, there's a reason that I'm a filmmaker, that Rippon's a filmmaker, that we are all here because of film, because it's really, really powerful. And it's one of the most powerful ways to get a message across. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Love it. Love it. Let's give a big round of applause to all of us here who are on stage. Thank you. Michelle Sugihara of CAPE, Rippon, Shruti, our filmmakers. Thank you for the two magnificent films and for being here tonight and for being you and shining some light in all of this, right? Thank you all of you for being here. I'm Michelle Miao, a member of the Board of Governors for the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California. If you love what we do, consider becoming a member. It's not much, and especially if you're a student, it's almost near free, or if you ask me, probably free too. But yes, we're very grateful. Now we get to have some fun. You get to ask some direct questions if you didn't want to ask them during the program. We have a beautiful reception that's about to start, so the wine's still flowing. And our good friends, the Bamboo, are here tonight. They brought some snacks with them. They're amazing folks who just started this organization and becoming a voice for the voiceless. Got a documentary out themselves that is focused on anti-Asian hate and violence that affects the Southeast Asian community. Say hello, Tata, Tuki, over there in the corner, so make sure you hit them up and say hello. Again, thank you to Julia Gao for making this program happen, Alaska Airlines, Priscilla Lim, who's here in the audience. Say hello. Yes.
Yes. And thank you to Michelle for hosting us, for bringing us back here. We love this. If you want to learn more about CAPE, we're at www.capeusa.com, and we are a 501c3 for now until the IRS decides to take that
stop
away.
it.
So support us while you can.
Oh gosh, so scary. Well, they keep losing folks, so we're just gonna stay on that. Yeah.
.org. Oh, www.capeusa.org.
Please support the work of CAPE. Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely, for amplifying us. We're gonna say goodnight. I'll see you out there in the reception hall.